Let's get back to Sports and Torts with David Spada and Elliott Harris on TalkZone.com.
Welcome back. I'm Elliott Harris. David Spada is out of the studio today, but we did manage to get together recently and have a wonderful interview with Del Crandall, the former Milwaukee Braves standout catcher and later a big league manager. So here is Del Crandall.
I didn't realize you played for the Boston Braves when you started.
Oh, well, I was 12.
How does the guy go from California to ending up at the Boston Braves?
Well, it was Johnny Moore signed me, and he had scouted me quite extensively, and he kind of charmed my parents, and so I signed with the Boston Braves. I signed a Milwaukee Brewers contract. They were the AAA farm club of the Boston Braves at that time. And so I was able to go to spring training with the Milwaukee Brewers. So it turned out to be a good move.
Who was on the team at that time when you came up?
Well, there was Earl Torgeson, Eddie Stanky, and Alvin Dark were there. Bob Elliott, Warren Spahn, and Johnny Sane. They had Clint Knetzer, and in the outfield, Tommy Holmes, who was a very, very good hitter. And then they traded Phil Macy when they brought me up on June the 15th. So they had just won the pennant the year before. And so they didn't seem like they were going to win it again, I guess. So they decided to bring me up from Class B ball, which was kind of a bold move at that.
Oh, exactly, because having a young catcher up there catching a veteran pitching staff that had just won the pennant?
Yes, exactly. It was, Phil Macy was a big part of their pennant-winning season, and so it was kind of a shock to replace him with a 19-year-old kid. But I was certainly glad they did.
What was it like being a 19-year-old kid calling pitches for Johnny Sane, Warren Spahn, people like that?
Well, Warren Spahn really could pitch to anybody. I mean, he had such good control, and although at that time he was more of a fastball pitcher and didn't have the screwball, and had a palm ball at that time, which he finally got rid of because the screwball and the palm ball were about the same speed. But they were good. Johnny Sane kind of called his own game. Bill Voiselle was there at the time. Red Barrett, Hogue, and Bob Hall was there. So and anyway, it was. Of course, when you're 19 years old, you think that you know everything anyway. So it was it was a transition for sure, but it was really a great experience, and I have to say that people treated me very well there.
So you didn't come up with the saying, what is it, Spahn and Sane and pray for rain?
Yeah, that was what it was in 1948 when they won the pennant, the National League pennant. It was kind of that, but they ignored the fact that Vern Bickford was a very, very good pitcher, and I think he won 14 games that year. So they kind of left him out of the mix, but it rhymed very well anyway.
And then you go in, you get your feet wet in the big leagues, and then you enter the military service for the Korean War.
Yes, I was there a year and a half. Played almost as much in 1949 as I did in 50 because they made a trade for Walker Cooper, who was an established major league catcher. And then in spring training of the following year, I went into the service. And I forgot to mention that Johnny Antonelli was there also. We were about the same age, and so he was a big help to me. He was one of the bonus babies that signed in 1948. So in 1949, we formed one of the youngest batteries, I guess, that in Major League history. But John Antonelli was a big help to me, and he and I both went into the service about the same time.
Did you play ball in the service, or were you fighting?
No, they kind of spoil athletes, and so I played. I was at about 13 months at Fort Ord, which we had a baseball team, and then when I went overseas, they stopped me in Japan, and I was able to play baseball over there too. So, and then I got back just in time for spring training in 1953.
By then, the team had moved from Boston to Milwaukee.
Yep, they moved. I think it was about March the 15th in spring training where they moved from Boston to Milwaukee. It was kind of a sudden move because it created, I guess, problems with travel and so forth, because we were still using trains in those days. But the following year they were able to adjust the schedule so that it wasn't so bad.
And you had some potent offense then. You had Aaron, Eddie Matthews, Joe Adcock. You put some big runs on the board.
Oh my goodness! You're talking about two Hall of Famers and Henry, and I've always called him Henry. I know his name is Hammerin' Hank, but we used to call him Henry all the time. And of course Eddie Matthews and Joe Adcock could hit him out of Grand Canyon, I think. And Wes Covington was there. Johnny Logan was a big contributor to what we were able to accomplish there in Milwaukee. And of course you had Spahn and Burdette, big winners. And we were able to fill in with Gene Conley and Bob Rush in those days. So Don McMahon came along. So we really did have really a good club that could swing the bat.
Johnny Temple on that team?
No, Johnny Logan was.
Johnny Logan was at short. Yeah.
Yeah, at shortstop. Johnny Temple played for Cincinnati.
Right. Okay. For some reason, I thought the two of them played together.
No, they fought a lot. When we were going to Cincinnati, it seemed like it wasn't a series until Johnny Temple and Johnny Logan came to blows. But it was a great rivalry.
And I see from between 53 and 59 that Braves pitching staff was either first or second in ERA every year except for 1 year. Was that because of your great calling of games?
Well, I'd like to think so, but we just had some talented pitchers, and of course led the way with Spahn and Burdette, and Bob Buell was a big part of it also. And he was, he won, 16, 17 games a year, and Gene Conley came along and helped us out. But it was mostly the doings of those two veterans, Spahn and Burdette. But you like to think if you're back there calling, Joey J was there too, Carlton Willie. I almost forgot those guys. When you're back there, you like to think you make a contribution to the pitching staff. So hopefully I did.
Now there are those who will say that Lew Burdette, I don't know how to put this delicately, loaded up the baseball.
Well, did you have to call for the spitter, or did he just throw it off naturally? Well, I was able to catch it, so I'm not sure whether that myth was reality or not. It's a very tough thing to talk about because the Cincinnati Reds and Bertie Tebbetts thought it was real that he did throw the spitter, but you don't like to. I don't like to say he did, and I don't like to say he didn't. So.
But half of that, the success of that pitch is getting in the opponent's mind that, hey, he is doctoring the baseball, whether he's doing it or not, right?
Well, he was great at that. He could get inside the hitter's head just about as well as anybody, and I know when hitters would step out of the box and ask the umpire to look at the baseball, he would always do one of three things. He would wipe it off on his uniform and then toss it to the umpire. or he would roll it all the way on the grass, which, if it was a spitter, would negate the wet spot, or he would throw it directly at the hitter. So he had two things that he did when they liked to step out and say, "Hey, let me look at the ball." So
I wouldn't want to be a catcher for a pitcher throwing a spitball because I want to touch that ball.
Well, baseball's not the most sanitary of games anyway, so it was okay.
Now, I will assume you were behind the plate the night you guys went up against the Pittsburgh Pirates and Harvey's Addicts was perfect into the 13th inning. What was that game like?
That was an amazing game. No walks, no errors, no nothing for 12 consecutive innings, and I contributed, I guess, 4 outs to his cause, as did a lot of other guys. But it was just one of those games. I don't think we even hit the ball good. I think Del Rice pinch hit and hit a line drive to left center field or something like that. But I don't think anybody hit the ball really well. So it was just one of those great experiences that you have in the game of baseball. Unfortunately, I was able to be part of it. And then of course the error and the intentional walk to Henry, and then Joe Adcock hitting the ball out of the ballpark that Henry thought was just up against the fence, so he cut across, and instead of being 3-0 and Joe Adcock getting a home run, it was 1-0, and Joe got credit for a double. So, but it was great to be a part of that game, no question.
And then you won the World Series finally in '57 against the Yankees when you hit that home run in the last game.
Yes, a lot of people were angry at me for hitting that home run because they said that they had 4 in the pool. and I got a lot of notes from people who were mad at me, but nobody wrote me the fact that they had 5 in the pool. So anyway, that was great too, and it looked like just another home run until the Yankees loaded the bases in the bottom of the 9th inning, and Moose Skowron came to the plate. So if he hits a grand slam home run, we still have a 1-run lead. So it turned out to be a big home run, or could have been a big home run. But then Matthews fielded the ground ball and back at third base and stepped on the bag, and it was I don't know. It's hard to describe that kind of feeling because it goes back to when you were a kid and wanted to be a Major League Baseball player, and then you're able to do that, and then all of a sudden you win the World Series. It's quite a high. There's no question about that. We had an opportunity really to have kind of a dynasty there because in '56 we finished 1 game behind Brooklyn. Then we won it in '57, won the World Series, and then we had a 3-game lead or a 3-1 game lead in '58, and the Yankees came back to beat us, and then we finished in a tie in '59 with the Dodgers. So we could have had quite a dynasty, and but it just didn't work out that way.
Now in your career, you caught 3 no-hitters, 2 of them in 1960, one by Burdette, one by Spahn. Did you know early on that both of those guys had no-hit stuff?
No, neither of them had no-hit stuff. When you talk about stuff, you think of Sam McDowell or Sandy Koufax and those kinds of people, but Spahn and Burdette had to do it with control and movement of the baseball, and had to count on their. Although Spahn struck out quite a few, but really had to count on the defense of to be able to throw a no-hitter, and the defense came through for both of them. But they did have just wonderful control and probably good movement to their pitches on those particular nights. But yeah, it was a thrill. The first one was Jim Wilson that I caught in 1954, and that was the first no-hitter that I caught. So it is a big part of it. I think Jeff Torborg's the only other one that has caught 3 no-hitters, and so it's a good feeling to know that you're able to do that.
I see you're an 11-time All-Star. I know a couple of those years is when they had the two All-Star games in 1 year. How are you not in the Hall of Fame?
Well, it's hard. Well, I don't know. I didn't have the offensive statistics to when you hit 254, that's not going to get people too excited. I think defensively, I was probably as good as anybody that played and in that era particularly, and so it's just I'm not sure I deserve to be there. It would be wonderful, but I don't. I don't kid myself. The offensive stats weren't there, and even though the defense was there, so I don't know. It just never crossed my mind that I was going to get into the Hall of Fame.
Now, moving from playing to managing, I assume it's a little bit simpler for a catcher since the catcher's always the smartest player on the field, right?
Yeah, the tools of ignorance. Notwithstanding, yeah. Well, I think you do have more exposure to the things that go on in a ball game. Not that there haven't been some very, very good managers who have not been catchers, but I think you have a kind of a leg up, so to speak, because you are involved in a lot of things that the manager does, and you're close to the manager, and you manage a pitching staff, and that's very important as far as being a good manager is concerned. And so I enjoyed my experiences there. I didn't have good ball clubs because the Brewers struggled when I took them over for 3.5 years, and then I went to Seattle, which was a young ball club, also an expansion ball club, and so it was difficult, but I enjoyed it nevertheless. I felt like that the ball clubs were better when I left them than they were when I got there. So, and Robin Yount is a big plus for me because he was 18 years old, and I saw him work out in spring training, and went to my general manager, who was then Jim Wilson, and asked him if an 18-year-old kid could make our ball club, and he says, "Well, sure." So I ended up playing him for about 15 games, and he handled the pressure very well, and he'd boot a ball, and you wouldn't even know the next play that he had booted it and didn't take it to the plate with him. So that was one of the things I did right anyway.
Well, not too many managers would say, I want to have an 18-year-old shortstop out there.
Well, we weren't going anyplace. I don't think we were fooling anybody, and it gave us an opportunity to. Rick Auerbach was our shortstop, and not to take anything away from him, but it just seemed as though Robin had so much more potential, and so it certainly proved to be the case.
Did you coming up as a 19-year-old have any influence on promoting Robin as an 18-year-old because people had faith in you at 19, so you figured I might as well have faith in Robin?
He earned the right to be on that club. I think my situation was a little bit different. I came out of the minor leagues after Billy Southworth and John Quinn had come down to see me play in Evansville. But Robin really earned his way on the club because of his play in spring training. I saw him work out. I was standing behind the cage, and I saw him work out one day, and he really caught my eye. In fact, I hit him some ground balls on my own. He was right near the end of his workout, and we had a rough field down there in Sun City, and the balls were hitting him on the shoulder, and it didn't seem to bother him. They were hitting him in the belly, and they were taking such bad hops. But but he just stayed with it and showed a good arm, showed good range, and that's when I went to Jim Wilson and asked him if he could make the ball club. And then of course I played him for about 15 games. So he really earned his way on the ball club, and I think my situation, I just kind of snuck up on everybody.
Did you envision someday Robin Yount would be a Hall of Famer?
Well, I don't think you can envision anybody being a Hall of Famer real early in their career, because they have to do certain things before you start thinking that. Like Henry Aaron. Henry Aaron probably could have led the league in hitting every year, but for some reason he decided that he was going to be a home run hitter, and certainly turned himself into the best home run hitter ever. And Eddie Matthews, he wasn't a very good third baseman to begin with, but then he turned himself into an excellent third baseman and just continued to hit home runs. So I think you have to play for a while. Certainly his attitude and his hustle and the way he played the game certainly had all the indications of a young man that's going to play there for a long time. And he wound up getting his 300 hits, and here he is in the Hall of Fame. So I think it was probably a little harder to project him as a Hall of Famer, as a little easier for Matthews and Aaron and those types of players.
I'll tell you what you don't get credit for is when you were managing the Dodgers AAA team from about 76 to 82, they had Rookie of the Year after Rookie of the Year come from Albuquerque, and I think it was because of your managing. I mean, look, you had Fernando, Sutcliffe, Steve Sachs, Steve Howe. I mean, what did you do to get those guys ready for the majors?
Well, the Dodgers in those days really had some talent, and most of them ran through the AAA there at Albuquerque, and it was a whole lot of fun managing. Not only did they have did we score a lot of runs and so forth, but they had good attitudes. They played the ball. They played baseball hard, and they played it very, very well. And they had talent. So we were a pretty good feeder for the Dodgers there for a long, long time. Although Steve Sachs never did play for me, and Valenzuela did for just a very short period of time. But the other guys were really intense ball players, and we just ran through some good talent there in Albuquerque.
The pitching staff, I mean, Dave Stewart, Bob Welsh coming through there also, I forgot about.
Yes, right. We did have some good pitching come through. As you mentioned, Sutcliffe was one of them, so we did have some good pitching, but we scored a lot of runs, and it seemed like those guys couldn't pitch every day. So we had some other guys, and they seemed to get the big outs. Right when they needed big outs, we seemed to get them. Alejandro Pena was a really a good reliever for us, and came up to be a good pitcher on the major league level also.
What was Henry Aaron like as a teammate?
Henry Aaron was a great teammate. He was. Matthews was very, very important to him in his development. Eddie and Henry became very close, and in the clubhouse, and I think he was very, very instrumental in how quickly Henry developed from being a little bit shy and so forth to really coming out of his shell, but he was a great teammate. I remember when we got him, I was managing the Brewers when we got him in '75, and the first thing he did when he came into the room, he said, "Hey," I'm not here to be a distraction. He said, "I just want to do whatever you want me to do," and he says, "I'm glad to be here." So that's the kind of guy he was.
When you were broadcasting the White Sox from 85 to 88, I remember you. Was your broadcast partner Don Drysdale?
No, my partner, I was on radio, and Drysdale was on television. My partner was Green. I want to say Lorne, but of course that isn't right.
Lorne.
Isn't that awful that I've forgotten his name?
Lawrence Green's the name, I believe. Right.
What is it?
I think you nailed it, just like you would a base runner trying to steal base.
Yeah,
Lawrence Green.
Okay.
When I think of Lawrence Green, I think of the cowboy actor.
Yeah. Or Lauren Brown.
Anyway, he was really good to me. He was he gave me an opportunity once he found out that I could speak. He was very good to me and let me go with explaining plays and that sort of thing. So it worked out good. I enjoyed that job, and then I went to the Brewers and was on television with Rory Marcus and enjoyed that job too. So I've had, actually, you might say that I've lost a lot of awfully good jobs.
So you never got a chance to work with Bob Uecker calling Brewer games?
No, never did.
The best baseball player you ever saw during your career? Or since?
Oh, there's no question. Henry Aaron's the best player that I ever saw. He didn't have the flair of Willie Mays. He could throw better than Willie Mays. He could run the bases as well as Willie Mays, and if they would have been able to steal bases in those days, if that would have been the game, he could have stolen as many bases as Willie Mays, and he was as good a right fielder as Mays was a center fielder, but Mays, of course, had that big flair about him, and Henry just went about his work without any flair at all. He just continued to hit home runs. So Henry Aaron's my pick.
I was at a Brewer game over the week with my kids, and I saw a tribute to the Milwaukee Braves, the Boston Braves. They're in Milwaukee. I always picture the Braves with Atlanta now, and the Brewers being like a Pilots spinoff. Do you associate more with the Brewers or with the Braves?
Oh, with the Braves. Oh yeah. There's no question. I was very glad that I could manage the Brewers, but when you talk about managing, I think you have to have a whole lot of success for a long period of time to associate yourself with a ball club. But my career in Milwaukee was actually as a player. So I'm a Brave, and they did a nice thing for me there in Milwaukee. They have a Roll of Honor that they call it, and they added me to that to the plaques that they have there in Miller Park. So that was good, and I'm also a member of the Braves Hall of Fame that's housed in Atlanta. So that takes in Boston Braves and Milwaukee Braves and Atlanta Braves. So I'm very fortunate to be a part of that too. 2
down, just 1 to go.
Yeah. Well, that one it's too far the distance for me to even see.
Welcome back, and thank you for having listened or watched or both to Sports and Torts with David Spada and Elliott Harris on TalkZone.com. I would like to thank our guest, Ann Myers-Drysdale and Del Crandall. I'd also like to thank our producer, Dave Olson, for another phenomenal job. Tune in again. We're on podcast. We're available anytime at TalkZone.com, Sports and Torts with David Spada and Elliott Harris. Thanks again, and see you next time.